maximizing space, small house extension in your garden. So I'm going to be walking through the process here. You'll get a couple of little glimpses of today's episode. So what I'm basically going to show you is how this all perspired and all the details of getting rid of our old garden shed, which we built about 10 years ago. So we built it and it's been lasting the test of time. You'll see here the garden shed was built in like a frame structure. In this episode, we're going to show you this being taken down. So I've got some builders who are doing a majority of the work here. So they actually did a lot of the heavy lifting, which will help at our age. We don't want to be doing too much physical labor. Where we can, we'll get help. So you'll see the garden is a nice size garden. This was a temporary shed structure which was being used, and it's basically going to get replaced with an extension. So if you're following this series, you'd have seen in episode 1 where I spoke about the plans and what's going on. So here you can see we do a lot of woodworking here. We do it for our Etsy shop. We do a lot of handmade orders, so we needed to have this space. But now we're adjusting this slightly into a more garden room slash office slash utility room. We haven't decided what the end goal is yet. So this is 2024 January 13th. I'm doing this, and this is going to be the day 1. So basically the builders helped clear out everything and started dismantling the shed. The shed was made from a timber structure, a 3x2 wood with the slats on the outside. The slats were like garden shed slats, so not like cedar or timber or anything like that, nothing too fancy. I had insulation in between the walls. I had a plastic membrane to stop it getting damp, and on the inside I basically had the plywood. We've got planning permission, and we've got a wide structure. 3 meters by just over 6 meters is the final dimensions of the extension that's going to be put here. We're going to be going through steps of showing you each section. So the foundation being dug up, the foundation being poured, and as we go through the journey, I'll give you an idea of what to expect. I'll also speak a little bit about the process of getting an application in, as well as the builders, and going through this step by step. So because we're getting this in our quote, we had an original price, and I basically brought the builders around. I said, this is what I need doing. I want you to take down the shed. I want you to clear everything up and have a full made structure. As you can see here, the structure itself has got uprights, and we've got timbers inside the building, and this plastic sheet basically helped. So you can see it's not a lot of damage here. For 10 years it's actually done quite well. It stood the test of time with multiple rains and snows. So as time goes on, you can see that this is going to be interesting concept, especially if you want to add some extra rooms or extensions or utility rooms towards your house. It did have to go through a full planning application as it was exceeding the permitted developments, but being able to remove this shed now will allow us to have an extra room basically. So we have an extra room, utility room outside, and you can see the shed being taken apart here. I've got sections of time lapse, and I've gone around with the phone, just taken a few clips just to share this with you, because it's always interesting to see these stories come into play and how long this type of process can take. So on day 1, they were able to remove the entire shed. This is quite a big shed. So each plywood is 4 foot long, and there was 4-foot plywoods on the floor as a base and 4 on the roof, and then we put them in our neighbor's garden, asked their permission, and we used the bottom of their garden. So thank you for allowing us to put these things in your garden. These are the timbers that we used, and they're still in good condition. They can still be used. These are the inner panels which had the plastic sheeting applied, and then the slats on the outside, and you can see this is the inside view of that. I think that would have been a good video for you to see how we made this shed, because it was very robust. It was made because we made it for ourselves, we made sure it's extra strong and it would withstand time, which it has done, because 10 years later it's still solid. I could easily see it lasting another 20 years here. You can even see when they tried to take it off, we had plugs and screws in the wall, and the wood didn't come off, but the brick broke. So we did a good job originally putting it on. We're basically getting everything ready here for the next step, which would be the foundations. I'm thinking of making that into a separate video, so check the sections on screen. You'll see the next episode in this series of building our maximizing space small house extension in your garden. Hello and welcome to day 2 and day 3 of building an extra room in our small 3 meter wide by 6 meter long narrow extension. It's planned to be like a studio extra room, utility room. We haven't really decided what the internal use is going to be yet, but it needs to be extra space. So at the end of the first day, They took down the shed, they took down the fence, and they took half of this. You'll see is like about 500 mil deep. And day 2 is when they got the second trench taken out. So what they're doing is they're using a wheelbarrow, and I like the way they did this. Some people may think you should have had a machine, but these guys don't need machines. They're like the machines themselves. If you're not that fit and you're not regularly doing exercise, then you will feel this the day after. But they basically went 6 meters right up to the wall on the left hand side. So that's going to be the back side of the extension wall. That's going to be the tallest part of the extension, and making a large pile which then will be taken up with the digger truck. You can see here now, this is a view from the garden neighbor's fence. You can just about see me putting plastic over because it started raining. So that's going to be the far end wall. So they took a little L shape out there, took all the slabs out, and that would be another 6 meter wall along that side, and that would be foundations again. So they started cutting that out. So in real time, it took about 4 hours to dig 1 meter into clay subsoil and 6 meters long and about 500 mil wide. So that took them about 4.5 hours. And then today they were able to do half of the other side as well. So by tomorrow they'll have that done, and then the top to make it into a big large U as you look at it from the camera. But you can see they're going through here, joining this up, and this was over 2 days, so it's continuous digging. And then they also got the gully. So they took the gully out, which is the bit where it's going to join into the old wall of the house. And you can see they're picking out just the main sections here. They've got a fire going, which is keeping them warm at the same time. And this is kind of the main last push now to get this done. It would have been ideal if they had a machine to dig this up, but they mentioned that it'll create a lot of mess in the garden, and they're happy to do it by hand. And clearly you can see they've done a decent job, and the inspector's well, spoiler, the inspector's been and he's approved it. So you can see the broomstick up to the handle there is about 1 meter basically, and that's how deep it is all the way around of the perimeter. And that's like giving you an idea of how deep foundations need to be, just to make sure they meet the guidelines. And then they will put that layer of cement below it, which will allow for the foundations to be secured. But obviously the inspector comes and then approves it, then that's when that second bit would happen. So here's me trying to get under the board here, just to show you like a walk all the way around. Welcome back to the small UK city garden extension. In today's episode we're going to be looking at a number of deliveries that come, as well as the pre-mixed concrete. Is it better to get pre-mixed concrete or mix it yourself? We've got some deliveries coming. So once the concrete goes down, we have some blocks. So these are grey blocks that will go down on the foundation damp proof layer below the wall of the actual extension. So the premix comes in this cement mixing van. I remember the olden day vans, they used to be like the turning cement mixers, but this was all computerized, and they offered a barrel service. So let me know how many barrels you think it took to get these foundations laid. Give your guesses in the comments. Let you know if you're right later on. You can count in the time lapse how many times they used barrels. I had a guess and I was totally off, because I thought they're going to fill all of it up with cement, but apparently they don't. They only need like 150 mil or 200 mil, something like that. We went overboard. We went deeper than we needed to, just to make sure there's a good solid foundation. So if you're quick enough, count in this time lapse how many barrels did they put down. So the guys from the cement mix had 2 people like sending down this cement through this. So you'll notice on this, cement comes out separately and sand comes out separately, and then it mixes it in this while it's dropping, so it gets really well mixed. So it's not already pre-mixed in the van. They've got like a different section. There's 2 sections in the cement van. One's holding water, one's holding sand, and there's another area for cement, which all gets mixed as it comes down this tunnel. And if you have like a hard access area, you can actually get an extended tunnel. They do charge you for that, but that's an option. Not sponsored or anything. It's just the guys that the builders use, because they've used them in the past and everything seemed to be fine. They had these really nice wheelbarrows. They were plastic, but they made light work of it. How many did the time lapse? I might have to count and tell you at the end of the video how many barrels they used, because I'm noticing that I had to stop the time lapse to carry on this other segment, because I recorded some on my phone as stuff was happening and I had the time lapse set up in the corner. So let me see if I can figure it out. I think it was something like, well, I'm not gonna tell you now because you're gonna comment. So yeah, so one of our builders was using like a rake just to tap it all down, getting rid of air bubbles, making sure it's a nice firm surface. Use this rake thing. And we also blocked off the lower section where the pipes were, so it didn't go further than it needed to go. So the idea about this is it needs to be a firm base below the bricks that are going to be laid, and that way you're ticking off the box for the planning. So part of the application, the architect's got like plans, so you need to do everything in a certain type of way. So that's the reason they're doing this now. So this is laid down, then there will be a process of laying down blocks, which is what we've already had delivered, and then we're going to get engineering bricks. We used another company, Jusons, something like that. Jusons, was it? Let me check. Yeah, I just checked. Juson, that's like an English company that makes the bricks and the stuff. So we got the engineering bricks and the wall bricks from Jusons, which is a separate company. You'll see at the end of this when they deliver them. So the bricks, the black ones are engineering bricks. We're a bit more expensive. I mean, like £2 a brick or something like that. And the red ones are about £1.50 a brick at the moment. I think prices do change. You're looking at about £900 worth of bricks here. So things are, getting expensive. Remember the days where they used to be like 20p, 30p a brick. Those days are kind of gone. And there are also people that go around collecting old bricks. So I don't know how that works, but if you're building an extension and you're breaking down a wall, there's often people on the street similar to like the metal collectors who collect old bricks. This is the damp membrane that will be used, and this is the ties to tie in the wall to the existing building. So I wanted to show all of this so you know roughly what's going on and types of things you need to buy basically. Luckily the builders know what they're doing, so they're getting it as they need it and doing what they need to do. The cement did dry after 2 days. See that? It's solid now. After the first day it was a little bit, not totally dry, but it was a bit, In this episode we are on day 5. I am counting the days of actual work taking place as opposed to consecutive days. So today we're going to see the blocks being laid, the foundation damp-proof layer being laid. Quick preview of what's coming up today. You'll see the bricks are going to be laid, and that was after day 1. It was solid. It would have been workable, but leaving it for 2 days made it even more solid. Now what I mean by this is, if you notice here, see how cold it is? The sand's just turned into clumps, so that's why it wouldn't mix as well. You can tell now that the foundations are solid. You can hear that when tapping it with a piece of wood. So we are more or less ready now for the layer of coarse bricks. So we're going to have blocks on the bottom, which brings it up to damp proof, and the workers were here, brought in their shovels and things to get this ready. So you're kind of seeing this as things progress. So I always have a time lapse in the corner, and then I use my mobile phone to take close-ups. So they're making sure that the boundary lines are marked up and we're within the rules, so we don't obviously go wider than our garden. We left a little bit of space there and kept the wall inside our garden. That way we definitely know that we're within our legal limit. So what they did is they laid blocks around and measured around just to make sure that the final wall will be as spec, because the architect gives you measurements that you need to stick to, and they're using cement and sand to make the mix for this. So they call this lots of different things. They call it muck, they call it mix, masala, mal, all sorts of stuff depending on who the builders are, where the corner bricks need to go so they can put a plumb line to use for their building. So they've got water in this mixing crate, and they're going to be mixing that down to make it a consistency, and they use fairy as like a plasticizer. Is it plasticizer? Is that the right word? But yeah, they normally you can use fancy stuff, but they use fairy, which kind of works in a similar fashion. So you can see here they laid the corner block down, and that's going to be the end block, and they put that in each corner, and they're going to use plumb lines, which basically a thread. They put one thread from one block to the other block, and that lets them basically go in a straight line and make sure they're sticking to the specs, like the measurements. You can see that yellow line there. They were mixing muck as they were going along, so cement and sand in their wheelbarrow, and you'll see they make light work of this. The bottom wall went down quite quickly. Within like 2 hours, the lower section all the way around was done. Main thing here is going to like a good layer of foundation down. So because the foundation cement has dried, they put a nice layer of thick muck, which is basically like the mix of concrete and sand, and they started laying the blocks. And it's like a consistency of like, when you make cakes and you put the icing on the cake, the thick stuff, like is it called icing? It's not called icing, is it? But yeah, I also liked how they break their blocks. These blocks are concrete. You basically get a chisel and you hammer through these, and you go all the way around, you mark it, and it gives you a precise cut. So little things like this are handy to see if you're thinking about doing this yourself. It is back-breaking work because it's all heavy blocks and things, so where possible, try and get builders. And if you're planning this yourself, maybe consider, if you're quite handy, get certain elements of the work done by builders, and the remaining bits that you want to do, you can do yourself. So now what you need to do is let me know once you've got to damp proof level, which is basically these 2 blocks with some damp proof membrane, which is basically like a plastic sheet, thin long sheet that goes on top of the bricks. And the middle section where the platform is, where I'm standing here, that will all be dug out, and there'll be insulation and cement in there to make it damp proof. So after that bit is when the inspector comes again. So the reason on this side we have engineering bricks is that floor level is slightly higher, not this side, the side behind me where he's currently doing it. So that wall, that ground will actually be sloped down and it'll be lower, which means you'll see some of these engineering bricks. So that's why they used engineering bricks, because they'll show. So they don't want there to be blocks, they wanted it to be engineering bricks, so it looks a bit nicer. So you'll see here they're mixing the cement, putting it on each of those bricks, and then laying out the bricks, which is always interesting to see. It's like a smooth process, and the walls are nice and plumb, and they look perfectly fine to me. So you'll see this is the lower section of the wall, and it progresses up to the further section. On the left hand side where you see the red brick is where the door will be to enter into this extension room, and it's detached from the house. So it's actually like an office room. When I say detached, I mean there's no internal entry from the house into this room. You'll have to come out and go into it. I wanted it separate to like the internal house entrance, so that way everything's there's more walls to use basically, and you don't have to go through the house to get into this. So there's little considerations which you would be at the architect stage and the planning stage. I'll also give you a link to an app that I found useful for like laying out internals of the extension. It's got like loads of little handy bits on there. It gives you an idea of where you can put things, and it's got measurements and things. So I'll put you that in the resources section. I'll need to put a note to remind myself to give you that. It's like an app which is free, by the way, so you don't have to pay for it. So it lets you play about with different settings and making sure you've got enough space for everything you want. Join me on episode 6, I'm going to call this Tiny Home in the UK City Garden. So coming up in this episode is going to be the insulation of the floor and the damp course, and I feel like that would be a nice use of this space. This is quite a good amount of space. We're looking at overall 8 foot by 20 foot, about 160 square feet internal space. Now this is a damp proof section of this extension build. When you're building an extension, there will be elements that you need to do in order to make sure the building is in building regulations. There's 2 separate bits here. So you have a planning application which basically says, okay, you can go ahead and make the planning application and you get approval. But then when you start doing building, that's where they have these little guidelines and things you need to do to make the building meet the UK regulations, what the guidelines are and all this, as well as how big this cement bed needs to be. So for example, what they're laying right now, there will be a plastic layer which is a damp proof course on both the inside and outside wall. That allows the moisture not to go up the wall and create you problems. So you can see the process here. They're basically laying it out and then stretching out this, I'll call it rubber. It's like a plastic type sheet that's cut down 2 sides. So they just roll it on and they make sure that stays there with bricks until the inspector comes and inspects it. This is one element of the damp proof course situation. So they're going to put this plastic on both internal and external wall. You can see here he's just pushing it down to make sure it sticks onto there. The plastic has a bit of like marks on there, which helps it to adhere to the cement. Originally it looked like I had a lot of space in the middle, but as they built both walls up, seeing it, I was like, you know what, that looks a bit smaller than I was anticipating. At the moment you can see there's 3 slabs in the middle with the platform where the wheelbarrow is. That's still in place. So the reason they do this is they normally put the external walls together, and then once that's drying and the inspector's waiting to come, they can actually take the middle section out. So here's a view of these walls. They look quite nice, straight walls with the plastic sheet on top for damp proofing. This is the top little section. The cement in the middle is going to be taken out. Cement, well, I call it cement, is 100 mil by 30 mil is what this rubber thing is they're using to put on the damp proof membrane, I'll call it. So you'll see now they've started digging out the middle section here, and this is where I thought in total from day 1 till now there's been about 4 days worth of digging. When I say 4 days, like proper constant digging. So for example, they start normally at 9, they'll get here by 9:15 in most cases, 9:30 latest they'll be here. So far the builders have been good. They've come every day. They said they were gonna come. And in the corner of the wall there was an old tree, and you'll see all these roots were from those trees. There's also bricks in the ground, so when they were digging they were kept hitting the bricks, and with the pickaxe and shovel that obviously took things a bit longer. So in total I think 4 days worth of work could have been saved if they hired a digger and dug out everything in the middle once and then built the wall and then put the foam insulation. So you'll see here now this mound is getting bigger and bigger, and they made light work of this. In 2 days they took out the whole entire bottom section. So they worked from like 9:30 till about 12, had like a tea break, then 12 till 3, and ate at 3, and then from 3 about half 3 till about 4, half 4 in some cases. So you'll notice there's like a good 6 hours worth of digging constantly with breaks in between. So they actually took 12 hours, 2 days. That would have been like 24 hours worth of savings if they used a digger. And once this is all out, this will all be clay and bricks, and the picker truck can come and take all of this away. So it saves you having like multiple skips. There's probably 3 skips worth, builder's skip worth of muck here, but with that picker it'll pick it up in one go. So that was a bit of a saving. I'll give you prices and all of that in the end, and also there are some additional information like resources that I'm putting together for this building extension process for a tiny home. So check out the description. You'll see a link to the website, the blog post to accompany this article. It'll basically give you like details about the builders, the information that you need to consider, common questions about extensions. Is it worth getting an extension? Do you need architects? Do you need builders? Can you do it yourself? What kind of regulations are there? How much does it cost? All these little things I'm breaking down so you can actually visit that and have a look at that. Because I think a lot of stuff I researched, but if I had everything in one place, it would have been very helpful. So now what they've done is they've taken everything out of the middle. So the entire middle of it now is empty to the point where they're pouring sand down. This is building sand to level off the floor. So then on top of this, they're going to put those big insulation foam blocks. So you'll see here's the Cellutex for the floor. This is like 150 millimeters thick, and this goes in the floor itself to help give you insulation. So when the house is finished, tiny house, there's plastic membrane at the bottom which will stop anything being sucked up through the floor, like giving any damp course issues. So the plastic went down first on the sand. So they put a nice bed of sand down. The plastic is laid out, and then you'll see here 1, 2, 3, and then plastic again, 4 and 5. So now think about these. These are 8 foot by 4 foot each. So we know the inside of the room is going to be 8 foot wide. That's not massive, but you know what? I've seen some extensions being done for smaller than what we're doing here. So we're quite pleased that it has given us some usable space in the end. So hopefully we'll get quite a bit of usable space in here. A nice office environment with like a bathroom as well. So you'll see here now, he had to get another 6th sheet of this Cellutex type insulation because we had space and gaps on the ends of the 8 foot length of the room, so the width of the room. So he cut them little blocks out, and then you see there he fits them into the gaps there. I'll show you there. See that? So it's like a little bit of a, maybe like a 3-inch, 4-inch, 3.5-inch in some cases, like a gap. It's time to pour the foundations. So today you will see in this episode the foundations being poured, but before they can do that, the picker comes to grab all that dirt and muck that was dug out from the foundations. So in this episode, you're going to see all the foundation work being completed. They will come through and pick out all the garbage. I'll give you details about prices at the end in like a full breakdown so you can see how much this costs. But when they pick up each piece, they do go through it as they lay it in their truck to make sure there's not other stuff in there. For example, if there's wood in there or other stuff like generic waste, they won't take it. It needs to be just bricks and clay or soil basically is what they will take. So they took as much as they could, and the remainder they put into the skip. So everything did not fit. There's about, here you can see in the skip, about 2 scoops went into the skip. Max has come around just to have a look, and right now we have half a bag of sand there. We've got 2 bags full of sand and another half bag sand there. Remember, we had 5 bags of sand. They've used the blocks for the foundations, the big grey blocks. We've still got some blocks here which you can see in front of these. So you'll see the bricks are here, which is the engineering bricks that they use in the ground layer, and here's the insulation they used for the floor. And Max is just jumping around, smelling everything as the inspector needs to. He's more important than the other inspectors. So you'll see here the cement was being mixed. We didn't get as high tech a mix this time, same company, but the first time the mixer that came was like a brand new machine. I think they only had it 2 years. This one's like a slightly older design where it's not as fancy as the first mixer when we poured the foundation trenches for the walls that are there. So how this works is, it's a bit weird, but this is what they do. You put foam in the ground in a hole that's being dug. Remember in the previous episode, if you're not following along, I'm basically recording every episode as a diary so you can see exactly what goes into an extension. They dug the hole out in the ground. They put sand down. They put plastic membrane, like a plastic sheet, basically a big one. They put this foam core, is about 150 millimeters, in the ground, and then they're cementing on top of that. So this is acting as like a floor insulation. How many barrels do you think it will take to fill this? They're going to fill is about 4 inches worth of cement basically, and it's like a runny mix, so it'll take about 2 days to dry. So that's something else. If they had some special chemical to help the cement dry quicker, that would have been a lot more helpful. But they're using the barrel service. They're bringing through the cement and they're putting it on top of this foam. We pat it down and then let it level out basically. So this is part of that process to ensure the floor has damp proof via the plastic membrane as well as the extra concrete they're putting on here. It's a mix in their machine. It used about 4 cubic meters in the end. Coming onto this now, you can see that the cement's being poured, it's being leveled out, and there will be an additional thin layer of cement that will go on top of this once things have progressed. But so far this day was waiting for the grabber to come and then the cement guys to come and put cement down. Once the cement's down, there's not really much the builders can do because they need to wait for it to dry. You don't want stuff dropping in there and working around it unless you've got a really big garden and there's space to do other work. But realistically now, the next step's going to probably be they're going to just smooth all of this out to give you like a nice smooth. I like this little platform thing they made out of wood and a plywood, so it works quite nicely. So you reach over and you basically lay it down and just drag it basically, and because it's a watery mix, it kind of brings a nice gloss finish to the top, so you got a nicer smoother finish. And this takes a little bit of work. We are here, the inspectors come and been, and the cement foundation has dried. In this episode you're going to be seeing the walls. So this is before things commence, and you can see here that this is the day after the cement was poured. It's still a little bit, see how it leaves a little bit of a mark, it's not completely dry. So 24 hours after they poured the cement, it wasn't completely dry. This is the day after, so this is the Friday, and Friday it was actually solid. They started getting the sand in and the plan was to begin building the walls. So remember, this is going to be a double layer wall, which means outside the bricks need to match the house. This is like a stipulation in the the architect's thing, like walls to match and the roof to match. So it'll be a tile slate roof and brick wall color matching the existing bricks. But yeah, once they started mixing them up, it basically, this day actually he was alone. So normally they have 2 workers, but the worker wasn't feeling well, so only 1 worker came, which meant the worker was mixing the cement. The worker was also bringing the bricks to use for the walls. So with the bricks now, you can see this is the other corner that he's come to, and they cement down the corner bricks and make sure they're fully plumb. So it's interesting to see this. He also was picking out particular bricks, like, the best face bricks for the certain spots to match the pattern of the wall. And the bricks also have a front and back, which I didn't really think about, but you'll notice there's a little divot in the back which has to face inside, so the wall outside looks nice. So this brick and mortar is going on top of that plastic layer, which basically means that the damp won't travel up the wall and into the upper bricks. The newer bricks that are made these days are better anyway at retention at not retaining moisture, like not sucking up, whereas the olden day bricks used to suck up water and act like a bit of a sponge. In the olden days, the foundations didn't used to be as deep, the walls didn't need to be as thick, but as time passes, things are progressing. So the reason behind a lot of this is, in the olden days you'll get like moss and damp walls, but you don't really meant to get that with this new thing. So what these metal ties are used for are, they hold the external wall to the internal wall. So if you have 2 walls with a gap, you'll see they're lined up here, you can see the metal, they actually hold the 2 walls together, so it gives you that consistent space and extra support between each of the walls, so they don't basically wobble about. So yeah, it's very interesting to see they have to put that every so often. They screw this to the wall that's being attached to, and has a little bracket that slides out and holds the bricks. When you work up it basically keeps the wall firmly against your current house. If you're building a detached one, you don't use these, but because our extension is joining onto our existing house, they had to use these, and that helped because it kept all the walls straight and obviously not wobbling or falling over. Thank you for joining me in this episode of the tiny home studio extension build. It's going to be interesting in this episode. Now, these bricks are getting more expensive, so It normally depends what you're using. You'll see one pallet's more or less finished and there's 2 pallets left. A lot of people decide, are they going to have blocks or are they going to have bricks? When you go through the planning application and your architect draws up the plans, they normally say match existing building. So that means you have external brick wall and internal block wall. You can, if you want to, go for blocks on both in and external and then have it rendered. That's an option, but this, I suppose, looks nicer as an extension. It depends on your budget and how much money you end up spending. The bricks are basically double the cost of blocks. What tends to happen is he will build up each corner like a pyramid shape, and then have the wall and do like 3 or 5 layers of bricks at a time, and then move around to the other side. And in the back, because the garden and the neighbours is a bit higher, there's more soil there, so they're using engineering bricks in the back. Remember, he's mixing the mortar, putting the mortar down, bringing the bricks. He's got a helper with him, so he's doing all of that. And the walls are kind of coming up to a point now where they're solid, they're firm, and then the next day he does a bit more. So you'll remember we're on probably episode 10 now. This is like 8 to 10 videos I've made. I'm trying to keep each of these separate, so at least someone else going through this process can use this as a bit of a diary, understand how long it takes and have a bit of expectations. And remember, this is an outer layer because we've got 2 layers to go. The outer layer is a brick layer. We have insulation in the middle, which will probably another little bit of time with putting insulation between the walls as they build up the inner layer. And the inner layer, you'll see the guy in the light grey jumper, he's doing the inner layer now. So the outer layer is being done by the brick, the inner layer is being laid, which are thermalite blocks. Those are like wider, 2-foot wide blocks. They're lighter than the ones we use for the dam course, and they're meant to be better for insulation. And we're going to have a Cellutex type insulation core boards between the walls, so you have an air gap as well. And that's normally stipulated in the architect's plans of what they want you to do. This is the floor insulation. Oh, here we go. We got inspector, the most important inspector coming. I'll come back to the story I was telling in a minute about the comments. So yeah, this is another day now. So in the morning, normally walking Max, he'll have a little look around and inspect everything. So this is after day 1. This is how far they were able to get up to the wall. And you'll see there's like 7 or 8 layers worth of bricks there, nearly all the way around. The back bit hasn't been done yet. And then the inner 1 layer of thermalite blocks, and then they've got the little tags there which they tie the inner wall to the outer wall, and insulation goes in the middle. So every now and again I have a look outside to see how much stuff is left, and we had 5 big ton bags of sand, and we were kind of getting low on those, so I'm guessing they may be getting another bag of those soon, as well as cement. They use quite a lot of cement with the mix. So each those, you know, the returning mixture cement thing, they put 2 barrels of sand to like 1 cement bag. So that's quite a rich mix, but yeah, I'm assuming there's some thought behind that and how they do that. This is, what you're seeing is about 3 days behind the real life works going on. They work every day apart from Friday, and they've had about 3 days where they've not worked because they've done what they needed to do. The inspector needed to come and inspect it, so that day they didn't do any more. For example, when they did the trenches for the side foundations and then the center foundations, so we had 2 inspectors. And the third one's going to be when the walls are built and we have the roof on, and then drainage. So it's just loads of visiting things. Those add extra days to it. It's time to insulate the walls. So we're at that point of the project of this small tiny home extension. What we got here is the Cellutex, which clicks together like giant jigsaw puzzles, like a Lego type puzzle thing. So they go in the gap. So remember, the outside wall is a brick wall, the inside there's a gap, and then there's an inner wall. So outside is brick, inside the gap is this insulation, and then there's an inner thermal light breeze block, which is along these things. There's a gap there. I'm going to explain about this because there's different guidelines out there, so it may not necessarily be right depending on where you're watching this, because different rules apply to different places. But each year the regulations seem to change, where they either have an air gap or they have that insulation filling the entire thing. There's pros and cons for both, so I'll overlap and explain what the thinking is here. So ideally, these insulation boards need to sit above the damp-proof layer of the ground. So you know, when we put that plastic down on the bottom and the plastic on the walls. So you'll see here, these are being cut up and fitted into the gap. Now, these two need to be snugly fit. Stay tuned if you're not already subscribed, and you can see all the challenges and things that you will face and how to speak to builders in a way that basically everybody's happy. So you don't want to, obviously, because a lot of arguments and things can come out of this, where I've heard about stories where things are not being done right, and then builders and the clients don't get on, and then things start breaking down. So here's an example of what I mean. The wall here you'll see is about 13 inches if I'm counting the internal foam which is on the floor, but 1 foot is basically wasted. You got 4 inches brick, which is that. Then you've got 90 centimeters under 4 inches, the foam, and then the inside block is 4 inches. So you'll see there's like a little gap there, about 10 mil. And then you got this like an inch of the foam here, so the plasterboards will go there. So now the question here is, these metal ties will kind of sit on top of these. Look, you can just push them down and they dent into the foam. They're already made in a way that they kind of hug the foam that goes inside. I'll keep calling it foam, but it's insulation. So then the block would be put in the front, and then the cement will sit on there, which will push these down, which means they all interlock into each other. So the builders mentioned that they will put this on the side where I have my windows and doors, and the back side, which is a taller one, they'll be putting the other stuff that I showed you earlier. But then I said, no, I don't want other stuff. I want the same Cellutex all around in the whole building. So there's an extra charge for this, which means because these are more expensive. However, they are better rated. So for example, you could have 50 mil of Cellutex, which is equivalent to about 100 mil of the thick the rock wool type stuff. So realistically here, by having this 90 centimeters, I'm getting extra thermal value. So it basically ups how well the heat is stored in the building, if that makes sense. So I don't mind paying a little bit extra here, but you need to consider what your goal is and how you're planning your project if it works out for you. Now this big Cellutex piece, they've put it in the air gap. It fits like the other one did, but they pushed it against the wall, which then meant that the little tie clips, the metal tie clips, came out of this end, like they kind of pierced through. So you'll notice it's tapping in you'll see they'll start ripping through the Cellutex. There's a little gap in the corner, and later on they cut pieces and fit those into there. Slowly they're building the inner wall, and as they're going up, they're using these breeze blocks. So there was a delivery of breeze blocks, which are, I'm calling them breeze blocks, but they're actually thermalite blocks. You see these metal ties, see they pop through there now? So you can kind of see there, like there's a gap there, and then we've got the metal ties coming through, which then the blocks will sit on. Now, having a quick look at what's available, the sand, they more or less used all the sand, and there's half a bag left. So at some point, there will need to be more sand ordered in for obviously this mix. So you'll see now he's putting these thermal light blocks in the inner layer, and the outer wall still being made. In terms of insulation and the heating elements, I've already got plans to put extra central heated heater in this extension, because it can easily link to the house. However, we can have additional electric heaters, and electric heaters got like a plug-in. So you can see here over the wall how this is looking, and the wall being built as well. So internally the blocks are being laid. The thermal light, they're not as heavy as the breeze blocks. They have they're called thermal light because they hold heat as well, so that's a good part of them. And thermal light blocks are quite good because you can use them above or below damp proof level, and they give you like a bit of extra sound proofing because they're thick blocks, and they give you a good fixing as well because you can fix shelves to them, radiators or bathroom fittings. So they give you a bit of a solid foundation instead of having like a inner timber frame type thing. So you'll see here now he's cutting extra Cellutex pieces to fit into the gaps. And over time, there's little things that you can speak about and find out what needs to change or how it needs to be correctly done. People have different expectations of builders, but as long as you know what you need done and you have a working knowledge of the basics, you can kind of work around that. So you'll see he was mixing muck, which is basically the same cement mix, and then putting the blocks around in the inner core. So slowly this is being built up now. There's still quite a lot of work going on here. We still have the roof to come on, and the internal needs to be finished, and then there needs to be lintels on the door and the windows, but those can only be placed when the wall has been built. So that'll be interesting, especially if we're going to be looking at having a solid wall, because the lintels will tie everything together, the roof going on, the ceiling, the beams will all hold the whole room together. So all of this works nicely together as things get adjusted, and that'll be working better and better. So you can see the thermal light blocks inside are doing nicely. They're being cut down with a saw. So he's got a separate saw that you can cut these blocks with. They're like big cardboard jigsaw Lego type blocks, I think. Building a tiny home in your yard. So this is continuing with our process. So we're building a tiny house in our garden, also known as a yard. In this episode, I'm going to be showing you the delivery. So we're going to get, because they were insulating the walls and building the wall at the same time. So I made specific episodes to give you that. So the last episode, you would have seen the episode before that, we were showing the wall being built up. This day falls between those days. So what's happening now is the wall has been built up with bricks to a certain point, and they're doing about 6 layers all the way around every day for 3 consecutive days. So you'll see here, this is where they started from. They're on the floor at the moment. So by the end of this episode, they're going to be on the stilts. They've had to put platforms up so they can reach the top of the wall. So remember, this is a pitched roof. So what that means is that the back wall where they currently are building will be higher to the front wall. So the roof has a slant similar to the previous building that's there. So slowly they're getting to a progressing stage now. So they've used a good 2,500 bricks. They've had 3 pallets of red bricks. They've used the engineering bricks, which is normally the blue color ones, the ones they use on the floor, as a pattern around the outside. And the weather's been good. It's been holding up. We've been having cloudy days. It's been a little bit cold sometimes, but overall the weather's been good for bricking. You'll see now they've put these blocks down. Not blocks, they've put the metal stilts down, and the beams that they're using are actually would be our roof beams, and that means that those roof beams will be on the top of the building. So once they are used, what will happen is they're using them at the moment, but they get to a certain point where they're building high enough, they can actually put the beams on the roof. So right now you'll see they've gone up with the bricks, and they also at the same time, the brick is doing the outside bricks, the helpers topping him up with bricks and giving him like these stilts. So on the back side they reached a point now that they put the stilts down. It's like metal, use them like for plasterboarding. They put the frame down, they put the wood down, and then they started working at a higher level. In general, he's working at 3 lines of bricks every 2-ish hours. So in a day's shift, 6 hours, like taking away their breaks and like lunch, they're doing 6 hours, they're doing about 6 lines. And how many bricks are there? Let me see if I can count these. 32 bricks per line. As I'm counting them on screen, I'm touching the screen and the bricks are getting smaller, they're harder to count. I'll count them in real life and let you know. There's about 32 bricks along one wall. And you'll see these here. These are like the metal strips that they put up on the wall to tie in the new wall to the old wall, just to keep it like tied in. And the bricks themselves are just a regular red bricks, as in from Jewson's is the company, UK company. So progression wise, you'll see there's like more or less half of where they were, they've built double that on top of that wall. And slowly with these types of projects, they can take a bit of time, but once the walls get built up, you're basically building the outer layer, which is the brick wall, and then you've got your insulation inside, and then the breeze block inside, which is a thermal light breeze block. So overall, I'm pleased with how things are going. Is there anything I noticed? Well, with most builders, there's going to have to be a bit of give and take. For example, while they're working, they're going to make a mess. Have they cleaned up? They'll be good at some things, they won't be good at other things. So maybe hire builders specifically for the task you want. I'm planning to do all the inside out, the finishing ourselves. So I'm going to do most of that stuff. This is like the bigger stuff that we needed builders to do. For example, digging the holes, building the walls, building actual things. So that is something to keep in mind if you're thinking about this project yourself. But you'll see this wall now is more or less getting to a point where we will start needing to insulate that wall and putting blocks on the inside, and that's when we'll be able to tell how well it does. So you'll see overall this wall's from the gate, everything's kind of coming up nicely now. So progression wise, 3 days of bricking basically, more or less, for that 160 square meters. So the sand, this got screed. This is slightly different. This is going to be for the inside floor, and then this is just building sand. 2 more big bags came, and Jewson's dropped off some bricks as well. Hello, welcome back to the tiny house build project. In this episode, we're going to be getting the insulation in the walls as well as the blocks built up internally. So the internal wall. This is a mix of day 13 and day 14. You'll notice there's an overlap here because they were building on the internal wall at the same time as the external wall. So overall, we're coming at a process now where things are moving along. You'll notice that this is a Cellutex walls. Originally, they had some other stuff they wanted to put in the back wall, which is acceptable, but wanted better thermal values. This is the stuff they were gonna put in. It's like this yellow super wall cavity insulation. It's like a super fiberglass type thing, but I preferred this. We still had that bag left over, so we do make use of that. I'll show you in a later episode what we end up doing with that yellow bag that they brought. So here they got Cellutex and they're pushing this up against the wall, and this is going to be the main insulation of the back walls. So the big blocks is about what, something like 4 foot, no, yeah, 4 foot, yeah, 4 foot by 8 foot panels, like a plywood type size, and they use three of these, well, six in total on the back wall alone, and these are individual big blocks. They're 3 inches thickness, so they're going to supply good thermal values because these are better rated in terms of keeping in the heat than the super the yellow bag stuff, the fiberglass stuff. So ideally this will be a little bit nicer for the insulation of this tiny house, because obviously we want to keep it. You'll see the thermolite blocks came as well for the delivery of these, and we've got these. They're not that heavy, they're 2 foot wide, so they're nice big blocks. They're light, they're not that heavy, but they provide good, again, thermalite, so thermal values. So in the UK, they basically build a double wall and it gets insulated, so it's good for noise, and the internal wall is separate from the external wall, and you have a gap in the middle, so that helps in a number of ways. So overall, the builders have been getting along with this. They've got these slots as well, which are slotting in on the side of the window and the door, and they are obviously being held together in like a block situation. But there's a metal tie that we talked about in early episodes that holds the external and internal wall, which are these, and these slide, the thermal blocks slide in between those, so they're held in place, and as each brick gets on, it gets cemented in, so the thermal ties hold both walls and the insulation in place. So it's always good to keep an eye out, and as long as they're willing to take, like, feedback, and you can say, I don't quite like this, can you change this, can we readjust this, or I don't mind paying extra if it costs extra, because originally we discussed having insulation put in, but maybe I should have specified to say I want Cellutex everywhere, because apparently you can have the fiberglass stuff, and looking online, even in the architect's plans, it says fiberglass or similar, so it's like kind of down to your choice and preference. So obviously this costs more money, so if they budgeted for fiberglass and you end up asking for Cellutex, you're going to pay the difference, and they'll fit it happily, even though there's a bit more fitting involved in this, because it's a bit more cumbersome. It's like solid pieces, whereas the fiberglass kind of is like a fabric type thing, and it just molds and kind of goes into contours, into shape. So you'll see now they've done the bottom one. Here's the second height of the Cellutex. So this will be within the room layer. So the room will be below here. So you're looking at about 8.5, 9 feet, and the ceiling will be on the internal side. And they mentioned that they don't need to insulate above that, because it'll be like a little mini loft area, which will be where the beams and the roof truss and the tiles go on top of that. So there's little things like that that would be something you can think about to see what you end up doing. I have got some plans for the loft area depending on how much usable space we get. So stay tuned, and I'll provide details about that. Again, in the description and in the pinned comment, I will put a link to the resources, like a free resources. All that basically means is I've made a blog article breaking down all the regular things that building an extension involves in the UK. Architects, builders, regulations, can you do it yourself, how much does it cost, what do you need to think about, what should you ask the builders, should you have a contract, all these questions that like kind of flew around my head. I've put them in one place for you, so if you need to look at that, it's free. So it's a website you can go to. We're internally looking at about 20 foot long and 8 foot wide. So it's a long, narrow extension, so it may feel a little bit like a corridor, but it's 8 foot corridor, so that's a big corridor. The beams have arrived as well, so I'll show you an episode where they had beams come in, which they're using for their scaffolding type situation. When I say beams, what I mean by that is the roof joists. And on this day, they stayed a little bit later. They stayed a bit like an hour extra, where they started after sunset, so you'll see it slowly getting darker and darker. So once they start getting on with it, and if it's a nice day, they will continue working until they finish like the bit they're doing. So in terms of building, that works out okay. But I did notice on a couple of days afterwards they were left a bit earlier, so they kind of make up their time, don't they? So if you're gonna do an hour extra overtime, then they're gonna make up for that on other days leaving early. So we finished off the back end. I remember the back wall is 4 meters high because we have a pitched roof. So that's why there was a little bit of like another day worth of jiggery pokery, I'm gonna call it, because it's just like finishing stuff off. Because looking at it is like everything's fine, but you'll notice, yeah, this needed, this wall needed going higher as well. So all these little things are things that will take time, and the main bits of work goes on. Welcome back to building a tiny house in my yard. We are at the roofing section, so there's going to be a lot of the rafters and the joists have arrived. What are we looking at here? This is going to be what the ceiling is going to be screwed onto, and in the architect's plans they actually have requirements for the rafters and joists to be the same size. I'll give you an idea what I mean by that. So it's 7 inches by 2 inches. That's how big these rafters are. There also is a plate. So we're building a tiny house in the UK. There's going to be quite a lot of time lapse in this episode as well to show you how this is progressing. These are the little plates they use. So they call them plates, but it's not actually plates. What they use them for is a wall plate. So when the wall finishes, like the block wall is when it finishes, they have cement bed, and then they have this wood on the top of the wall. And then the joists and everything get screwed into this wall plate, so it's like an easier place to screw into. So here's the roof joists. So these go along, and these are what the ceiling internal plasterboards will fix to. So they level these off, and then there's other elements of this process that you'll be interested to see, which will be the joists being put into place. I did also contemplate at this point, I'm like 3 days ahead of where you are. So right now what you're seeing is the joist being put in, but currently we're on the 10th of February, and they've actually just done the first layer of slate on the roof. So they've done the joist, the rafters, inspectors been and passed it, and now we're actually doing joists. So tomorrow they will actually have the roof completely done with all the roof laid with tiles. And this is another thing, they know how big the room is. I don't understand why they didn't just order all the joists at one time. Like, for example, they ordered 3 less. So this is what I mean. This is what holds the wall plate onto the wall. It's like a big metal L bracket. They screw it onto the wall, and they hold the joist on the inside of the building to stop the roof being ripped off if it ever gets really windy or tornado happens, which they have happened once since we've been here. So you'll see they basically put them on the wall. They normally... Well, they put 4 on each side. There's 8 in total on this bottom wall plate. Later on, you will see in the next episode where they've actually got the ceiling joists also rest on a wall plate, and they weren't going to include these metal straps. And I saw that and I was like, well, you need to put straps on that. And there's things where I'm noticing things and I'm having to ask for it to be done, then it's being done. Like, for example, the insulation wasn't done all the way up till the top of the wall. And it seems like they put the roof joists in, and if I didn't say anything, would they have not put the insulation in? So it seems like there's an element of you have to be on your feet with this, because if you miss it, and you don't say nothing, they just carry on and assume, oh yeah, they don't know what they're doing, so I'll just do what I need to do. This level of build with the level of application fees you pay, and you'd assume you got an architect and then you've got an inspector. Like, for example, see the insulation is not all the way up the wall, there's like a big gap, and then I had to ask for that to be done. So overall it's looking a little more. There's also elements of this. It looks bigger now. It looked small, then it looked bigger, and now the roof's on, it looks smaller again. I think it's just the light getting into the building and it makes it look bigger or smaller. So you'll have different ups and lows of the extension. You'll be thinking, is it worth the amount of effort we're going through for this extra space? So you'll see here they're putting these rafters on the roof, and the reason they're doing this is they're bringing the blocks up and using the rafters as like a platform. So it's like multi-purpose, so they don't have to have a scaffolding system set up. So these blocks were used overall. Remember the block delivery we had in the previous episode? I thought there was a lot of blocks, But then I remembered, okay, the back wall's 4 foot high, so they're going to have to block all of that up. So that's where these extra blocks are being used. Yeah, so they mixed up some more cement and they cut the blocks down. They fitted them into the spaces, and then after that you'll see more. You see that block? But yeah, leaving that block, they cut it in half and then joined two together. Even here now, you'll see the bottom wood on the wall, inside the wall, has got metal ties down. The top one hasn't got ties down. So if I didn't notice, well, I knew there should be something there, but I didn't say anything. I kept it till the last minute to see, are they just going to do it later? Am I just expecting them to do it now? Because it makes sense to do it now. But no, they carried on. They cemented it, started putting the rafters in. And if I didn't stop them or say something, I think the roof would have been on. And then they would have tried to screws in with the roof on, where you can't reach your hand in there to screw it. So little things like this is where I get a little bit confused. But overall, they've done a number of these extensions in the area. The bits that you can see look very nice. The brickwork's excellent, the roofs look excellent, but the bits you can't see, like internally, the insulation, the little ties, the little screws they're using, the types of cuts they're doing, which you won't be able to see in the finished product. It seems like they're not putting as much effort in there. Even the insulation, for example, that insulation, they put the roof joists on, and see the insulation, I asked them to put the insulation in. I said, well, now that you put the roof on, well, not roof, the ceiling joist, you know that you need to put insulation in, don't you? Also the brick, now this is the finishing of the roof, so you'll notice the wall is built up to a specific level, and then they're just slanting the roof so that the little extra buttons for the roof slates overhang slightly over the wall. So joining me, we're on episode 15 or day 15. Remember, these are consecutive days of building work going on. So this is a tiny house build in the UK. Because what's happening now is inspectors are passing work that's below standard, and the builders are getting onto the fact about this, and they're not doing the work up to scratch. For example, there are no lintels above the doors or the windows, and it's been passed. And the pictures clearly show there's no lintel in place. So carrying on now, they're putting the battens on the roof. You can see this work being carried out. You're meant to put straps on the top of the plates, the wood plates. They were trying to put these on. So you can see this. It's like a DIY metal, I don't understand how. And I had to say to him, you're not planning to put them on the roof, holding the plate in place, are you? And he kind of just smirked. But then he ended up going and buying the proper metal plates that hold the wood in place. You see the metal things there, these long things now. This is what I got him to buy, the proper versions, so he can screw it down. And some are screwed, some are nailed. So there's a number of things there are major failings, but are they failings? Because if they're being passed, they're not failings, are they? The tiling they did quite nicely. They kind of staggered them correctly. If you're a roofer right there or a joiner, let me know if this is correct. But it seemed like everything else was on point. The brick walls were good. The tiles were good. Attention to detail wasn't excellent. And there are a few things where they're trying to save money. And you'll notice I'm peeking my head around all the time just to see what's going on and how they're doing stuff. So they're putting nails down, and then they're using the copper rivet swivel discs to hold the following plate in place. And at the end, I was expecting them to put a ridge on the top, but they did not put a ridge. And I don't know if this is a cost-saving measure again, and they're trying to skimp, or if it's okay. Now, there I am again, popping up just to see if they're getting on. As long as you're there and you're keeping an eye on them, they'll be bang on. The minute you turn your head, something will go wrong. They tried to cover up a section where they did not put a fascia board down with a PVC board, so I clearly knew it happened, but I was expecting them to buy another piece. But the minute I was gone is the minute they did that. So I don't mind them saying this is finished, can you get this, if they're not going to pay for it. But when the minute they're trying to covering things up, it's like when you want to be like, okay, so what else are you covering up? Now, this is going to be interesting. So I'm not going to give you the builder's details, because if you asked me, would you recommend the builders? I'll say, if you want a hole dug, yes. If you want a wall built, yes. Don't get any more than that done. Is this how this is supposed to be done? So they're going to hammer that into the rafters. The extra fabric that's hanging down, they're going to cut that away. And then at the end of this, they're going to put, on top of this wood, they're going to put a PVC fascia board. Measure once and cut 10 times is like the motto. So every time they try to cut woods, if you saw the rafters, there's like a double notch thing. So if they've done similar things, I would assume that, you don't, but am I being too harsh? You tell me in the comments. And they had a really blunt standing blade that they're trying to cut this with and pulling this with, yanking it with. So it's just these little things that, you're a builder, you should have all the equipment you need. Why don't you have extra standing blades? Why are you using a rusty old blade that's not cutting anything? Why don't you just use a scissors? Why are you putting me through this? What is going on? And they know they're doing it wrong. It's just, you know, and see this gap. So this, I knew there's a gap there. I was wondering at what point they're going to buy the piece. And as soon as that I turned my head, that 5-10 minutes when I was away, they basically put the fascia board straight on top of it, covering that gap. And also, this is a fascia board. This should be on the outside, but it looks like they were screwing through the board. And then I had to say something, and at that point, then they removed it and replaced it. Why is what is going on? This is becoming a big morning video. This is metal aluminium face plates. Apparently, these are meant to be used for corrugated sheets, I thought, but it looked quite good, so I didn't mind it, and it looked more sleek. So they're gonna put this here instead of those concrete ridge caps. Apparently, this thing costs about £45 each, but it looked quite nice. It's like quite sleek and finished. However, they tried to use these screw caps, and because I had to go to the shop to get those, I did not record the remainder of it. So this is some other footage to show you. Look at that insulation, disgusting. Half an insulation piece there. So they were gonna, in the top end caps, they were gonna drill the top flashing on. I don't have footage of it because I need to record the footage, but here's some other footage to just talk over. So they were going to put that on. I've got some other ones. Even those are not the correct ones, but it's better than what they wanted to do. And it was going to rain for a couple of days. I don't want rain coming in, so I've used those other waterproof caps, which I'll put a picture of, show you what I mean. Thanks for joining me in this episode. We are on day 16 and day 17. It was over 2 days. This is going to be a section about the internal bits now. So we'll be looking at the plans. You remember there was a 2-section split in the middle, but considering once I've had the walls built, there wasn't as much space inside as I thought there would be. So I'm just gonna have a single partition, which we're discussing right now. You'll see where the tap is, where that little, they're using like a little temporary heater thing to heat coffee and tea and stuff. Behind there in the ground, there is a spot for the drain pipe to go out from, and that's the far wall here. You can see there's already some hot and cold water there, and the electrical plug unit, which is going to be extended. And you'll notice in this episode, electrics are being done. So the dry fit, the first fit of the electrics, which is basically the wires going around, and that was okay. They did a decent job of that. And he's basically going into the breeze blocks and digging holes, and those are for the double sockets. One will be a higher one, maybe for a TV on the wall or something, or plasma screen or something. Plasma screen, do you even get plasma screens anymore? LCD, yeah, you know, the latest ones, whatever they are. So they've locked off about 1100 millimeters of space wise, so that's nearly 2.5 foot. That's going to be for a shower area. They used a 3x2 to lock that off basically, and that's what's going to be plasterboarded. There's different types of plasterboard, and there was discussions around what to do. We already have thermolite blocks, which are those big grey blocks that are inside, and they're supposed to be quite good at keeping the the heat. You can get insulated plasterboards. There's moisture resistant plasterboards, even to the extent of acoustic plasterboards, which meant to help like with dampening of sound. You have impact resistant, fire retardant, foil backed plasterboards, and 4-in-1. Skimming is basically where they go around putting a multi-finish on the drywall. In some countries I've seen they can put tape on the joints and just filler the joints and then like paint directly onto the drywall. That is an option, but because these guys have got the well, they can plaster. This is not plaster. This is the dab plasterboard adhesive. They put this in dabs on the back of the plasterboard and then stick the plasterboard to the wall. And once that's dried, a couple of hours normally, and you can actually skim on top of it. There's a few different options there, and you'll see they dab this onto the wall by putting this adhesive in blobs similar to tiles, and then they put the plasterboard on top and use a spirit level just to make sure it's level. So these little things like this are stuff you can think about. Obviously this is a bit more expensive because you're going to be having plasterboards, adhesive and skimming, and then paint on top of that. So you can see the metal cappings on the wall. That's where the wires are going down, and those are good to have to protect the wire in case you ever drill or you have a stud detector. It will detect the metal in the wall, which then helps you basically just not hit the screws. Take a guess, how many plasterboards do you think it took to plaster the entire small office, it'll give you an idea of size, because plasterboards are something like 8 foot by 4 foot. That's like a generic size that they come in. You'll see now they're starting to put on the ceiling boards, and these are fire resistant, fire retardant boards. They're a bit thicker and they've got a pink layer on them. So now it's starting to come together, and they've got insulation above that as well. So overall, there's quite a few elements of this build. They did not put the insulations all the way down the wall to meet the wall insulation. So the ceiling insulation should meet the wall insulation. So you've got like a nice blanket around the building. But being the cowboys that they are, you'll notice that they missed out quite a few things, and they're cutting through the boards, and you'll see there's like 3 boards in the ceiling wide. That's about 4 foot, 8 foot, and then a bit more. So it's quite a lot of space in the end. So overall, they've got a few little sections that they're covering up with the boards, and then there's going to be, this is the important part. So this is the important part, because they need to make sure it's all level and flat, because then they will seem, there's normally like plasterboard tape, it's like a bandage type thing. They stick that on the joints, so when they plaster, skim it with plaster, then it holds all the boards together. You can see now the tape coming into play now. So if you look at the ceiling, you'll notice he's putting some white bandage tape on the seams, and that basically holds the boards to each other. You know, the little gap that's between the boards. When you plaster it, it shouldn't be noticeable with this tape. And the skimming needs to go on in a couple of layers. And I noticed that when they plastered and skimmed it, maybe, well, definitely they put a really thin layer on. And just these little things where it seemed like the joints were good. When the skimming goes on, it's just a bit disappointing having a really thin layer, because obviously they're saving money by using less plaster. They're smooth walls, but I was able to see where the tape was, like for example the joints, and they're using fire retardant boards, which is why they're pink. And they also had this metal beading that they had to put around the corners, just to give it like a nice corner on the edge. So you'll notice here this washroom hasn't fully been done yet. Thanks for joining me in episode 18. This is also day 18 and day 19, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. How it works is they basically skim over the plasterboard. There's a number of steps involved. You'll see here he's putting tape on the joints. It's like a special mesh tape, and it's designed for plasterboards. Now, looking online, there's a few different variations of how this should be done. They say online that there should be 2 coats of plaster skimming on the plasterboards. Now, these guys did 1 thick coat, and then they waited, and you'll see in this video clip it's time-lapsed, so how they managed to do this. There's 2 of them basically working on the ceiling, and the ceiling is quite intensive because it's like quite high up, and you have to look up and your neck hurts after a little while. So you'll see they're putting a thick coat on. However, naturally the ceiling was quite good, so they put a good thick coat on the ceiling. But I found later on when they started doing the walls, I don't think they put as thick a coat on. I did mention this to the builders, so I'll explain the explanation they gave me. You can see I'm talking to him here now, but what's happening is they've always got a good excuse for everything they do, and it makes it sound like, oh, okay, there's a reason behind why they're doing it. But most of the time, cowboy builders will have an excuse behind most of the ways they're skimming on costs. So you'll see now they're doing individual walls. One of the walls is longer than the other wall, so obviously it takes longer. So what they did do is they put a thick coat down. Well, I thought it was a thick coat. Looking at the plaster when it's wet, it always looks thick, but when they smooth it out, it feels like they're like finishing off. When it's wet, it looks shiny. So it looked like they were doing a decent coat, but then as it was drying, every day I was noticing that, I don't know, it just didn't look that thick to me. So overall, it's not a bad finish, but that's what it looks like on camera. In real life, as it dries, I'm seeing lots of little like different colored spots. Not spots, but when the paint goes on, I'll be able to tell. But it seems like it's even. This is the bag. Multi-finish is what they're using. And these are like the trowels they're using with the water, with the brush as well. And when they started doing the walls, you'll see they similar kind of situation. They started from a corner and they were pulling him along. And overall, it looked like it's like a nice finish. But is this necessary? Because I think some places they just put tape on the joints and then they can just like filler the joints and then sand out the board and then just paint straight onto the card, because it would probably take a little bit better than trying to paint freshly painted plaster. Freshly plastered plaster. This is the next day I looked at it, and you can see how it's like shrieking, drying. I'm looking at it from different angles, like it's a bit dark spots, a bit of light spots, but I'm assuming as it dries out, it'll all get like a nice light like what would you nude type color, like a pinky lighty pinky color. So here's the windows, double glazed windows, custom made to the fitting, and I was a bit shocked at how badly they fit the windows. I kept it in this episode because this all ties together. This side is going to be skimmed once these are in, and they basically put these on the windowsill, couple of whacked in a few screws, and that's it. Like no plugs, just straight into the brick. Well, that screwed into the windowsill, and then the whole window just screwed into the brick wall, but not in the brick, in the mortar. So then they got these metal little corner bits, which were, in some cases they nailed it, in other cases they bonded it. I don't know why the difference is. I feel like they could have still nailed this, but in the door they used nails to hold this in place, but here they did it with bonding. So bonding is designed to bond two things together. This is what it looked like before the corners finished off, and before this you saw what it looked like. So I'm putting both clips in so you can see the difference it can make. So this is the frame, as in the door frame. So the door frame they put temporarily in place because I don't want a plastic PVC door. I wanted a oak, like a solid wood door. And this is an internal door and an external door. The internal door will be for the shower area, the bathroom area, and the outside will be the main oak door. Yeah, this is where they're putting the oak frame in, so the external frame, and they're just putting bits and bobs, like, you know, wooden bobs to hold stuff in place, which won't be seen, but it's just a bit confusing to me why they wouldn't just get new wood to put in there. So it's like, this is where the botchiness comes into play, and they put a couple of screws. They did use plugs here because I specifically said I want the drawer to be strong, and they put 5 screws on each side because we can have hinges, and the door's quite a heavy door because it's a solid wood door as well. And yeah, it was square, it was strong, but just the process, it didn't feel professional. That's what I'm probably getting at. So they apparently have 20 years of experience, but nothing they've done so far, they've done in one go. Does that make sense? Like, if I've been doing something for 20 years, I would be there and that frame would have been fitted where you could tell it was effortless for me to fit it because I've done it for 20 years. They're capable of doing it because when they were doing the wall, they were pinning the walls into the existing building. They used plugs there and they did that perfectly. So just maybe they're off days, but if you're naturally good at something and you're doing it for that long, there's no way you can be bad at it. But overall, will I get a usable building? Yes, I will. Is it perfect? No, it's not. Has the inspector passed it? Yes, they have. So the question is, who is the bigger cowboy, the builder or the inspector that's passing it, or the person who's paying for it to be done? Are we all just cowboys? I think that's what it's boiling down to. If you watched this far, well done. You are following through on this journey. Building a small garden. You can see here when they laid the floor foundations, they left this gap. It's just about a foot. I could literally fit my foot in there. But what we have got is there will be enough space to have a soil pipe to come out of the building and join onto the existing drainage. In the UK, if you're planning a build, part of the inspection process is going to be they check if you have good drainage and how you are linking to existing drainage for surface water and any other foul water, basically drain water or toilet flushing water. So you'll see in the inner wall they left a gap, as in they left a few bricks, but I don't know why on the outer wall they didn't leave the space. So for example, you can see here now they've having to hammer drill through the block. I feel like they weren't 100% sure where the toilet would be going, even though I said where I wanted it. They wanted to make sure the wall is built and then we could have the pipe as far on the edge of the corner as possible. So right now there where the pipe is coming out is actually the internal edge. You can see here now this pipe work is just tedious. It's bits and bobs, joining things together, getting the right brackets, and they can be quite expensive for these soil pipes. The joins are somewhere in the region of like £15 to £20 per join, depending on the type of join and the junctions and the T-joins and all sorts. So you'll see here he made quite light work of it, and we had a separate drainage system. So I wanted the rainwater from the front of this house where there will be a slope to come into like a driveway type gutter, you know, maybe walkway, the long walkways. And this is the black long there you can see here, just as he laid behind him, that block driveway gutter type thing. That will link onto the soil pipe, but the soil pipe will be underground for the toilet, and we can have a join on that for the shower and the sink, so it all goes down one pipe because it's all foul water, and the rainwater will go through a separate guttering system. So we sent photos to the inspector, and the first time the inspectors actually said anything of any rejection type situation. So he said on top of that soil pipe you need to have a lintel. So this makes me feel like, okay, so the inspector does know what he's talking about. And then I told the builders, and then the builders said, okay, you don't need one, but I will put one above there because the inspector's asked. So he's put a lintel, which is basically like a big slab, not a slab, but like a concrete beam above the soil pipe. So the wall itself is not supported or is not crushing the pipe in any way. It's freestanding, but you can see here this is the concrete lintel that is basically like it's like a long slab. Think of it like a slab, like a long block. They put that over the pipe, they re-cemented that. Then I sent that photo to the inspector and he approved it. So you'll notice the works is coming along now quite nicely. So the guttering system, the drainage system is this episode, and the extension's fully built. The skimming's done inside. He's just doing the finishing touches around now. So what's going on now is inside that washroom area, he's drilling in the shower unit. We're going to have a mixer tap shower unit, which would be a hot and water and cold water mixer. I thought about having electric shower here, but I don't know. We'll see how things progress. I can always add it on if we need to at a later point. But this pipe work will be behind the stud work, so it'll be all hidden. When I say stud work, they're going to put plaster boards over this and plaster this in. So this will all be behind the shower tiling, and there'll be a sliding shower door. So there's a lot of pipe work that goes on behind here. I also got them to leave a couple of extra hot and colds inside the main area because I'm planning to have a small maybe kitchen sink just for like drinking water and like if it's a hot day or something, maybe, something like that. Here's those pipes I'm talking about. So he's left a hot and cold here. So if I put a kitchen unit across that wall there, I can fit probably like a 1,000 unit and a 500 unit, which would be like enough for a kettle, microwave and a sink. So like, just like a mini kitchen just for reheating food and giving you like drinking water and having cups of teas, which would be enough. So this is where the shower mixing system will fit on. And you can see down here, that's where the pipe joins on to create enough options for the sink and toilet in the washroom and the shower, and then 2 pipes for the kitchen water, which can be on this wall. So you'll see that wall there, the partition wall, that's like a fire retardant. They used plasterboards on it, fire retardant insulation in that wall there. So the one behind the kitchen. So the plasterboards there are fire retardant, and that is fire retardant. And then that was the internal stuff done. We're waiting for the shower tray to come, and then he started on the drainage. This is the rainwater. So these things are quite expensive as well. So like you get a long length of drainage, and then you get all the clamps and the turns and everything. You need to spend like 50-60 quid just on the rainwater system for the upper drainage. What would you call this? That plastic thing, the rain collects in. There's an official name for it. So the end cap goes on, and that funnels the water away from the building into the drainage, so we can have a nice dry front, which kind of works nicely. So the drainage, they did a good job here. It seemed all okay. They used enough brackets. It all looked nice, and the flashing looks better now with the drainage on as well. And all that rainwater will then connect onto the existing drain pipe and go down into that drainage system that we've made. So nice clean finish overall. 4 out of 5 stars. So you'll see in the far corner there where all the pipes go, this is what it looks like. So we've taken the slabs up. We will be replacing the slabs as part of my small home studio build, but the old building, you'll see here where all that moss is growing on the wall, that's where the slabs used to butt up against, where the lower 2 slabs you can see, which are a darker color than the upper shade, that's what's being dug out. So I've got some builders in. There will be a damp layer in each house. Every house has this lead or plastic layer. What happens is when they build a wall, they actually put a layer of lead down, or tiles or plastic. That stops the moisture from the ground coming up and going into your walls of your house. So during this section of the build, while the building of my extension is taking place, I told the builders my existing old house has problems with damp. We need to fix that by first lowering the slabs in my garden to lower 150 millimeter below the damp proof layer. Because all the drainage and the pipes would be affected, as those will all need to be lowered, as well as the soil pipe there, you can see the black one. We did a workaround. The workaround was to create a new type of damp proof layer which would help stop moisture from the ground going up into the walls. This is a waterproof plastic sheet. I'll explain how this helps you and what this can do And also I'll give you a progress update this time next year so you can see how well it does over winter. In the UK we get a lot of rain. What they're using here is the plastic sheet on the wall tacked in place. They've got a screed, which is now, this is sand and cement mix in the bottom. So they're creating a new concrete area basically for water not to pass into the building. He put a bit of water into that concrete and that plastic was sitting there. He then gets a roof slates and pushes them up against the building. The theory behind this is if water is passing on this patio, it butts up against the slate and that channels it down into the drain, and also it stops any sitting water being sucked up by the old bricks. So the home bricks, old house bricks, are designed to basically suck up a lot of water. So now what we're doing here is we're fixing this up, because you'll notice I built an extension, and this is like an update as part of my extension because they did the drainage for my extension, as I have a little washroom in my extension. But as part of that, they redid the drainage. They did the slabs again. I asked them to raise all the slabs and reset these slabs up. And also, when your builders are doing this, make sure, I asked them to specifically put down a plastic sheet, then spread out some sand, and then put the paving blocks on top of that. The reason for this is it stops weeds from growing from the ground through your slabs or your patio cracks and the gaps. It's very important to do this at this stage. However, in this situation, now that we have a plastic sheet, nothing can grow from underneath the ground through the gaps. Anything that grows will only be in the cracks of the cement from the slabs where they join up. So if you watched my other episode where I showed you how to brush sand cement mix into the gaps, which stops moss and weeds from going in the gaps, that is a big step and it helps a lot. Flowing from the drain and hitting the wall, and it's that sucking up water. So you'll notice we lifted up our old slabs here and we saved them. And now they're basically cutting those down and fitting those here to give us a nice flush fit. So it's, think of it like a tiling in your bathroom. If you spill water in your bath and the tiles are there, it basically runs down the tiles and they're not going to be sucked up by the floor. This is the same sort of scenario, but we're just making sure that any water that comes does not hit those bricks. Now you see that nice little slate layer. If your slabs are covering the damp proof, that's where your issues will be. And then you'll see I did the same thing like I showed you in my other video, which has worked on my other house as well. We're basically sanding. We're brushing in sand and cement in the gaps. It will keep dropping in, but carry on doing that. The idea here is the sand and cement will create a thin layer within the gap, which is only really thin anyway, and this sits there stopping any water going through the gap, as well as stopping any weeds or seeds that birds fly around and drop stuff from going into those gaps and then growing into weeds. This eliminates the need for having any gaps, and you'll see they did a little bit of cementing around the drain pipe, and this is sand here, and the drains, the gutters, the gullies have been fixed. There's a little bit of driveway drain there because I left the long pathway as a slope. So all of this joins onto this long pathway, which is about 12 to 13 slabs long. That's 2-foot slabs each, and the extension is on the left hand side. You see the new building. So you'll see here you use a spade to basically lower this out, and then he's going to put a nice big plastic sheet, and you'll see that plastic sheet is on the floor now, and then we'll put the sand on top of this, which will help to give you a bed for the slab to sit on. So about 1.5 inches of that. You'll see there's a driveway gutter on the bottom, which is already designed to allow all the water from the slope to go down, go into the gutter, and then go into the drainage system. We don't want water sitting anywhere. So you'll see now they put the bed of sand down, which is like a screed. A screed is a mix of small stones and building sand, and like a bit more grainy. Think of it like sand but with like stones in. That basically, when cemented, it has more strength, because when the cement holds the stones together in the sand, you get a stronger mix and it's less likely to crack. So what they're doing here is laying down each slab on the sand mix, making sure it's sloped down, and then dropping a little bit of cement. They don't need to do this, but they put a bit of cement in just to create a little bit of bondage between the slab and the floor to stop it wheezing about. Quickly show you the sand situation. You see here we got big ton bags of this sand and screed, and this was used inside our extension on the floor as well to make like a thin layer on the floor. You'll see if you squish the sand, See, if you carry on switching, there's little bits of like stones in there. They're not massive, but they're big enough to create bondage when it cements together. This is day 24, and in this episode, we're going to be setting up our Wired for Success, installing a separate fuse box in your home office. So welcome to this small home office build. You'll notice here, this is a small fuse. So it's important to get these done from a reputable person. We've got an LED light for the bathroom, which is going to be a wall ceiling light for waterproofness, and a simple light fitting here with LED light bulbs. So all of these things with a fan. So a fan will be fitted into the bathroom area as well. So there's a number of things here that will be fitted and used for computers, heaters, laptops, you know, the number of things. In total, I've got 8 double sockets around this extension. We're talking about 160 square foot extension, and it's actually got a washroom shower system built in as well. And roughly you can see here what this kind of, you're looking at about 60-ish quid worth of stuff here, and it's normally the fitting that gets you. So what I did do is I recorded my section as well. So while the electrician was doing his first fit of the wires, I pushed in some extra internet cables into this home office. What that means is we're going to get some good speeds of internet. So up here is what the fuse box will be attached to, and it'll be housed in a cabinet area to keep it separate from the washroom. And there's wires behind the wall taking us here. So what's happening here is I've got RJ45 Cat6 internet cables, and I've wired a few houses for internet, so I kind of know what I'm doing. So what I'm doing here is I've pushed the wires through, and I'm adding on the little jacks in the end. You just want to make sure you use the right standard and the colors of the cables are correct. These are shielded cases. So these ones are Cat5 cables, shielded ends. So these are jacks basically. You can make a cable run as long as you want and add these on the end. If you're not too handy with this, you can just buy pre-made ones. When you push them through the wall and they've got these on, it's a bit more tricky to basically do that. So what I end up doing is pushing the cable through. So what will happen is I'll have 2 of these cables sitting next to the fuse box. There'll be a enclosed fuse box, and I might have a router in there or a unit where I can then use like a switch to have more wires if I want full high-speed internet. The electrician will do his bit. I'm doing the internet bit because this doesn't involve any electricity. You'll see I just got the cables out here. You'll have like a set of cables in their different colors. Have a look online if you're not sure how to do this. There's videos online. So what I do is I have a picture to show me which colors I need to put in which order, and I refer to my phone to look at that picture, and then I push them through on these open-ended jacks. It used to be a lot harder. They're a lot easier now because you can push all the cable through and just cut off the extra bit. So yeah, so these are basically jacks. I put red and blue caps on there just so that I know which ones are which for the internet, and I've got 2 cables here ready for high-speed internet. So I'm joining the extension on via a coupler system, which are again available online. I might put links in the description, or if you're interested, check the pinned comment. I'll link you to an article which is supporting this extension home office build, and you'll see all the details about everything I'm using. So the electrical system is basically going to be plugs and lighting, and the internet system is my system that I'm doing. And you see you get these little clips that you can just push and join the jack on the end, and it kind of creates its own seal, and then you cut off the extra cables. This is an older push fit that I'm using, and it doesn't have the automatic cutter, so I end up cutting the wires off separately. But once it's done, you basically get a solid connection for your internet. So your home internet Wi-Fi will be quicker, the speed will be better, and it'll actually you'll have less dropped frames. For example, if you're uploading videos or doing gameplay stuff, there'll be less dropped frames. So I did a little mark there so I know where to cut, and then I just use a standing blade to cut off the extra cables. Just be careful with standing blades because they can be, well, sharp. Yeah, so the internet cables are done, and then what I did was, this was on the day that the builder did not come, and I purposely left that hole in the wall. You'll see that hole in the wall. So if I need to access these in future, I can access them because I'll know there's a system there. You basically repeat the same thing on the opposite end, and you put the other jack on the side, the RJ45 clip, and then you can basically plug in. I did a test with my little tester just to make sure all the cables were working, and you'll see here, see how easy that is. You push them all the way through in the right color, and then there's the picture that I'm referring to, the color of the cables. And that's internet basically sorted. So now I'll have good high-speed internet as well as separate wires for the system of the fuse box. In a while you'll see the builder doing his bit for the electrics and stuff as well, but this basically took me about 30 minutes, if that, to get the 2 cables, 4 ends put on. Just a bit fiddly and finicky, but once you've got them done, you know you've got internet in the home extension. You'll see this is a Wi-Fi repeater. How it works is you plug it in, you plug the cable into the side, so it repeats your home internet for a longer distance. So if you're struggling getting internet in your shed, you can use this in a various number of ways. It can repeat the Wi-Fi, or it can give you other options. And you see the builder turned up and then he started feeding through the wires and putting through the lights and things. I think every single thing they've done, there's been like one element that's gone wrong. So nothing's been perfect so far. But you're going to have to learn to figure out how to get around these types of situations, because in life there will be situations like this. And I think it worked out in my favor because that cable was in the wall. So if I need to access that in the future, it might have been a bit more tricky because I would have to break the plaster. So you'll see that he put sockets everywhere and he set those up, and then all the wires lead to the fuse box, which is fitted in the top corner of this. It's a washroom. However, it will be enclosed in its own unit separately, and it'll be far away from the shower and any water, so we should be all right in terms of the guidance and regulations and stuff. So there, it's in the top corner. We'll have a box unit made there, and all the wires feed into this. And how it works is it's like a garage type extra fuse box unit. So you know the one you have in your houses, that big one that everything leads into, and if something triggers in the house, the button goes down and then you have to come in and raise the button. This should isolate all these electrics from the house. So if anything goes wrong in this environment and the light triggers something or something powerful is used, you can simply come into this room and just switch it back on again from here. As well as fitting that, he fitted a LED light in the washroom and a fan. This is all included in the price that I paid him. All the sockets were his, all the cable, everything you see so far has been his. I think, has there been anything that's mine? Only two things that I upgraded: the roof, which you're going to see a later video on, the end cap slates. I wanted some better quality ones, and the insulation in the upper little loft area and the back wall. So that was like extras that I had done. Apart from that, everything else was his, and as part of the price. You'll see in the pinned comment, as well as the articles that support this video series, you'll see and the doors were his and the frames and everything as well. You'll see what this ended up costing and the breakdown of pricing. This is day 23. In this episode, I'm going to be looking at the washroom. Compact living small home office build with an integrated washroom. And now we're going to be looking at what's going in the washroom. So it's nothing complicated. It's a very simple setup. I will walk you through the process in this episode of the shower tray, tiling, the floor, in general, what you need to think about when you're making a washroom. So in general, the space you need is determined by what you want in there. First here, you'll see the shower tray. Now we need a firm base for the shower tray to sit upon, because the drain is below the wash system of the shower tray. So here you'll see a timber structure being constructed on the floor. We've got a cement solid ground floor. Then we apply some plywood. Where possible, try and get marine plywood, because that's better at moisture retention, or what's the opposite of moisture retention? Yeah, whatever that is. So it doesn't take up moisture, basically. It's resistant to moisture. So that was the first stage of creating the base, a firm, solid base. And this space, it's 1100 millimeters wide. So you'll see the shower tray was custom designed to fit into this area. We made sure to leave enough space so we can have a nice wide shower system. I'm using the widest point of the back wall, screwing down the plywood and having that in a firm place, then using some Gorilla Glue grip silicone type situation to hold the whole system down. So you'll see that it's just measuring up to see where the drain system goes, and then using a drain pipe, which then all fits into the drainage system. So if you remember in the earlier episodes when the foundations were being laid, we left a good gap, about a foot worth of gap all the way along one side of the wall, and that's where all the pipes are going down now. So they're all going to be hidden away in the ground. And we also are planning to have a small kitchen area, like a washroom with the kitchen attached to the back. And the kitchen, when I say kitchen, I'm talking like a unit with maybe a white microwave, a kettle, facilities for water, so like a hot and cold water. And that's what we're leaving this pipe here for. So you'll see the washroom things are here, and you see the plasterboards. on the wall and the skimming. It's still taking some time to dry because we're still in March, February. So we also decided to have an outside pipe. So you see the drainage all links into the existing drain pipe, down pipe to go into the drain. And I wanted an extra pipe outside. So remember I talked about forethinking anything you need. When you come home with muddy shoes from walking the dog, it's a good idea to have a tap outside. You can just wash off your feet or have some water access above a drain and save you going in the mucky feet inside the house and having to wash them again. So little things like this are handy, and while they're doing it, it's not like a much of a hassle for the builder to do this. You just stick out a cold water tap out the side. You could even have a hot if you have a foam cover over your tap so it doesn't freeze over in winter. It'll probably be a couple of £100, 100 to £200 to have these extra attachments added. And while he's here, at most I think it must have cost him material wise probably £11-12 worth of like pipe. Is only like a 2-foot pipe coming out here. The tap I already had, which is from my old tap that used to be outside, is a brass tap. You also pop to get some tiles, and you'll see a number of tile options that I looked at. I didn't want anything fancy. I wanted it to be like sleek and normal design, and that's kind of what I went with. This was a bit too intense, but the one I went with is like a marble effect, and it's got a ripple effect on it. So see this, it looks like water's on there. So that was nice. So it's $10.95 a pack, and we ended up taking 6 packs. This is the mix for the mortar. So it's using self-adhesive. No, not self-adhesive. We bought powdered stuff. It's not too difficult. You can get pre-mixed tubs of this. It's a little bit more expensive, but if you get the powder yourself, you can mix it in batches and get the tiling going. So you gave it a layer there of this waterproof type membranes to give it like a good adhesion, and then you started laying the tiles up on the wall. So in total we looked about 7 tiles up one wall and about cut off pieces as well. So the shower's going to be attached here, remember, and it looked okay, nothing too fancy, but I think normally they put it on like on the wall and do like a grid pattern with the grill thing, you know, the what you call it, like a big scraper, the one they use for plastering, that thing. He did cut out with the angle grinder for the mixer taps, which he did quite a decent job of. Took out little squares and then pushed them on, and this process took about half a day, about 3 hours worth of work here, and he left them to dry and then he grouted them the next day. So this is, again, I'm giving you these in days of work, but there has been more time that's passed. So you'll notice as the project's coming along towards the ending now, overall the tiling wasn't too bad. He followed the lines along, and then he mixed those and used those little stoppers to keep the gap genuine across all of it. And then the day after is when he grouted it. So this will be like a couple of days worth of work. And this is the white grout he's used. So with the grout, you basically mix it to a consistency and pushed it into the gaps with like a scraper and a smudgy type tool. And that was another morning's worth of work. So the grouting was done and all of that system was set up. Overall, it's coming along nicely. So you can have a look here. He kind of went around and then he went through and pushed in the grout. There's little bits there that he wiped off afterwards. So overall, rating the builders in terms of the work they've done, the brickwork was good. The floor insulation was good. And the slabbing outside was good. What else was good? The electrics were good because they put some electrics in. So the next episode you're going to see is going to be electrics as well. So they're putting in all like the sockets and the fuse board and all that stuff to separate this from the house as a separate switching unit. You'll see he's using like a back of a screwdriver type drill bit to just, you know, push the stuff in. So he hasn't got the correct tools, but does it do the job? Yeah. So I don't know. Two minds about that. Obviously, you can have all the tools and no idea, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, overall, not a bad finish. It needs washing up and stuff, but once it's all siliconed in, it will do well. So this is a quick preview of like the lighting and stuff going on. So there's a light here, waterproof light, and also a fan that sucks up air out of here. When the light comes on, the fan comes on. So that will help with like all the moisture from the shower and, well, any smells and stuff in the toilet. There's a look at the join. He joined it on the side of the soil pipe, and then that's going to be cemented in, and then the floor is going to all be even. So he uses some sand and cement, like similar to what he did in the previous room, just to firm up the floor, and then self-leveling compound will go on top and give us a good key area to put the floor on. Thanks for joining me on episode. Now, looking at this, you'll see this is a shower enclosure in the washroom area. The plastering's being done. There's a little bit of paint areas that I've put to test the paint out. It's going to be a brilliant white. But in this episode, you're going to be seeing this shower enclosure being put in to the washroom. It's like is it called tempered glass? It's like a shatterproof glass. So it's a stronger glass. Most showers are made out of this. So you'll see for the enclosure, he's using a silicone bead where he actually puts the aluminium frame to the wall, and he will be screwing that into the wall. The shower itself, it's a mixer tap, and you'll see there's a handrail that can be screwed into the tiling. The shower enclosure goes in nicely. The handrails go in okay. So all these little things are, just straightforward processes that builders should be good at. This is the floor lino which will go down the washroom. It's like a beige tile effect thing. So what the builder did was they cut this out and they put it on the floor. In general, most builders try their best. However, you will have opportunities to challenge them. So he cut the lino down. He put the lino down. Can you guess what happened and why I thought, that's the final straw? You'll see. So, okay, he's cutting the lino, he's putting that down, and this is for the floor. We will have a toilet going here and a sink basin. So at this point, he's laying down the lino, and these will have like a sealed perimeter, and there'll be skirting as well. So here's a toilet being, dry fitted to check that. You'll notice there's a hole in the wall. Ignore that for now. That's basically for access for the water, and that will be sealed over once we've done the tap on there. So the water system, the toilet system, the lino's been put down to size as well as it can be, and these little things are coming together. The washroom, so he started putting things together. He didn't level off the toilet. The cistern, there's two bolts on the tops, so I'm calling it a cistern, is that the right term, where the water goes in for the flushing of the toilet. So he put that on, but he tightened one screw too tight than the other, so it wasn't level. So what I did do is I got at a spirit level just to see what is going on, and I spirit leveled the toilet, and it wasn't level. And then I spirit level the actual seat of the toilet, like the main lower section of the cistern, and that wasn't level. And then I thought, why is the toilet wobbling? And then I did the floor. I checked the floor, and the floor was not level. So I said to him, you've built the whole extension, you're a builder, and you say you've got 20 years worth of experience. Why is the floor not level? And you'll see over this episode, he says, okay, I ran out of sand or something. He didn't have any washers for the toilet, so I gave him some washers from my stuff. So at this point, I was like, okay, now I'm feeling like definitely all they can do is dig a hole and build a wall. Anything else above that is not their skill or forte. So at this point, I realized the toilet is not level, and I moved the toilet. He screwed it down, and he didn't screw it down correctly because the floor was just basically sand. It wasn't cement and sand. He didn't put the correct ratio in. So at this point, he said, oh, okay, what I'll do is I'll take it out and I'll relay the floor. And he did that, and then he said, I'll have to leave it for 3 days. I said to him, well, if you had leveled the floor out previously correctly, then you wouldn't have to waste another 3 days. So at this point, I was like, you know what, leave it, I'll do it. So I've told him to go. He's taken his tools. I've given him all the stuff he needed that he left here, and take it with him. So basically, he doesn't have any tools remaining here. All that's left here is stuff that I need to complete. So you'll see he's tried to do the sink, and this time lapses of the entire process. Just before this time lapse, you saw when I checked the toilet. That's actually ahead of this, but this is just showing you how long he spent trying to do the toilet and the sink. And he also didn't give the sink water the right amount of flow, and he just siliconed the sink straight onto the wall. No screws, no nothing. The sink normally has 2 screws below it, which need to be, this is where I gave him the tape measure, and he starts tape measure the spirit level, and he starts checking things and leveling things, and he's like, oh, okay, see how much wobble there is. He's going to put that, actually this is it, he's going to put wood underneath each side to level it off. I said to him, you laid the floor, it's not like the floor was already laid, so why did you not lay the level floor? And the sink wasn't level, and then he started taking things away and putting them away. So he took everything off. He said, I'm going to relay the floor. So what kind of builder lays a floor and it's not level? So he laid, see there? So that, yeah, okay. So let me know in the comments what you think is interesting. And he relayed the floor, he put sand down and cement down, and he let that dry. And after that, I've not let him come back. So the remainder of these processes you'll see now will be me. That's why it's taking a bit longer now, because I'm doing the work as well as filming. Whereas before, as he was doing it, I was just filming bits and bobs and it wasn't as intensive. Whereas if you're doing the work yourself and filming, things take a little bit longer. So you'll see he started putting buckets and sand and cement and screed to level off the floor. And yeah, well, that is an entire cowboy type situation, isn't it? Leveling the floor was not done. What? Okay, so he put through another cement and screed, and he this time used a spirit level to make sure it's level, and it still isn't actually level. It's still a little bit off. When I say a little bit, about 3-4 mil off, and considering he's using a spirit level there, I don't understand why he could get that wrong. Because once the screed is laid, it doesn't contract or anything, does it? And yeah, so that's like kind of there. And this took about 2 days to dry, and during that time I came back and did other bits and bobs around there. So the remaining things that he would have done would have been fitting the doors on, fitting the skirtings on, doing a lot of little finishing touches like the extractor fan ending he hasn't done. So this is 2 days later and things are drying. So the floor is drier now, the shower's been done, but there's just little bits and bobs. So you'll see the electrics are working. There's a little fan that he turns on, and also that fan he just screwed straight into the plasterboard ceiling. And when I was painting the ceiling, that fan kind of drooped down because he didn't use plugs or he didn't screw them in properly. He used plasterboard little screws. So there's loads of little things that are niggling at me, but at this time and moment in place, I'm like, you know what, I could do a better job, and I am going to do the job. So you'll see the remainder of this video is me finishing off what he should have done. So I've relayed the lino. I've found the little bits where he didn't correctly measure it up and adjusted it. So you'll see here I put the toilet and the pipe on, and I noticed that the flow, like the drop from the toilet, the sink to the toilet, wasn't quite correct. And because the back floor is still not level, I've pulled the liner over a little bit, because the liner is about 2 mil thick, and that's making me a little bit happier that it's a little bit more level than it would have been. So yeah, it doesn't need to be as level as I want it to be, but considering it's a new build, it would help. And I've seen a lot of videos. See, even I had to mix up my own little bit of cement to fill up the gaps that he left around the soil pipe. And it's like these just little things. Also, the soil pipe was connected directly to the rainwater pipe, so the foul smell comes out from that, whereas it should have been like a water gully or something that has like a seal, so the water stops the smell coming up on hot days. So here you'll see I leveled off the toilet in multiple ways. I made sure the cistern was level, the back was level, the seat was level, and then adjusted the piping to make sure that all works properly. And yeah, these little things are things that take time, but because I could do it, I was like, you know what, I should have just done all the internal work myself at the starting, so I'm not too bothered, and I'm capable of doing it, so it's fine. So here you'll see I adjust the sink, and that's going to be screwed onto the wall with plugs and longer screws with washers which have correct use. So you'll see here I use the waterproof washers. Even though water won't get to the top of that cistern, I just like it to be a bit better. There you'll see I use the proper screws to go into the floor, and it's all solid now. So there's little bits and bobs left, as well as the extractor fan. He messed that up basically. So what I did is I took the pipe out, I drilled the hole, and I put my own jigsaw in there to cut out the extractor fan. So you'll see behind the insulation there's like the extractor fan for the bathroom, so like getting rid of the steam and bad smells. So I lined that up here and then put the end cap on myself, cutting through the fascia board and the wardrobe behind there. So this is where it goes, and realistically it's behind the drain pipe, but it is adjusted so that it goes a bit lower, if that makes sense. It goes below the drain pipe. Realistically there's bits there that could be better. However, you'll see here now still it's okay, main bits are done. There's loads of paint options out there where you can plaster them. I'm going to show you a couple of options, how I did it, what I did. So we went down to Homebase, had a look at the selection of paints. They've got a lot of fancy paint options. I picked up a few different paint options, and those were pure brilliant white silk, which would be the final layer, and then one of the walls will be an accent wall, like a darker color, ruby chocolate. The idea is if you have a long deep room, if you have one dark wall, it makes the room look a bit better. You'll notice that we got crown emulsion, matte emulsion on the back of this tub. You can pause that. It says you can water down the paint. What that means is you put water and paint and you mix it, and that's the first coat. You'll see I prep the area first. So you'll see here there's 3 different scenarios here. In one of them I mix 50% water and 50% paint, and that still scratches. In another one I mixed less paint and more water, so I was using the scoop. So it's like 2 scoops 2 paint. I did 1 scoop 3 water, and I found the right ratio. I did a little test batch, left it for a day to see which one worked best, and then what I did was I sanded down all the plaster which you saw earlier just before this, and you'll see the mix of paint. So the first thing I did was scoop out some paint into a big plastic tub and then put water in that and then mix that together, and then did the little test of what you saw earlier, and that all was okay. And my ratio for fresh plaster is very watery, but you want to seal the plaster. It sucks a lot of water when you freshly paint plaster. So in this example here I had 2 or 3 scoops, 3 scoops of water to 1 scoop of paint. If you use this matte emulsion, when it comes out of the tub it's very, very thick. So the idea here is we want to water it down so we can give everything a coat and let it suck up the water, leaving the paint behind. Make sure the paint you buy allows you to water it down, because not all paint allows you to water it down. This was matte emulsion, the Crown brand. You can get that at home base, you can get it at Wix. If you're in the UK, it's available in most places. Leave your plaster to dry as long as possible. I gave it 3 coats of this mix. I let it dry half an hour in between, and I kept going and seeing the spots. See there, I left it to dry, and then I will come back and then go through the different segments. You'll notice this wall here that I'm washing, I haven't painted that yet. So what I did do was sugar soap. It's like a type of thing you can get in decorating shops. I use a sponge and a light dilution of that just to wash the walls down first, let it dry a bit, and then painted. So that made sure that it did not suck out all the water from the paint. The main thing that you get issues with here is the water. The new plaster just keeps sucking up all the moisture from the paint. So you'll see this is a second layer now. I've already done 1 layer. I'm going on the second layer. You can slowly see the white becoming whiter, and give it about half an hour between coats. And if you can help it, give it a longer period of time. I wanted to get a light mist coat, they call this, down, and that allowed me to basically get a lot of the paint down. So you'll see how watery the paint is. That's 1, 2, 3. So 1 paint to 3 water, and still as it's drying you can see spots of wet. So what I did do was I gave it something like 3 coats of this and slowly upped the ratio. So like 1 paint, 3 water, then 2 paint, 2 water, then 3 paint, 1 water, and then finally the final coat of thick paint. And I'm going to give it 2 coats of thick paint, and you can feel when it's dry and if there's any powdery residue or not. So you'll see these are not going to be powdering off. So the main thing here is keep it consistent, slowly work through the pace and see how you get this. So see, this is like a 50-50 mix now. It's not as watery as the first 1 to 3, and this works because you're sealing the walls, and as the walls are being sealed you're basically creating, see that? So you can see how that goes and applies on. And I purposely left a section here by the light switch where I did a 50-50 mix to see how well that does over time with the other walls. So other walls 1 paint, 3 water. This one was 2 paint, 2 water. And slowly looking around the room, it's kind of at a point now where it's getting there. It's getting a nice mist coat. So I left this to dry for a couple of days. The room looks a lot smaller now because all the walls are white. See here now? So you'll see here, this is where the silk is going on now. And the silk is a little bit more shiny basically. I wanted the final finish in the bathroom anyway to be shiny, and that had multiple coats. We are coming to the end of this small home office build project. Quick preview of this episode. I will be getting the door ready and hanging the door myself. The skirting is going to be cut down to size. It's going to be painted with varnish and set up ready for finishing, as well as the final few coats of paint will be going on as well. So with the door itself, you're basically gonna get a door to the size of your frame. This is a hardwood exterior door, and it's a 6-panel door. So what I did was I measured the door, checked for any spots which were uneven, and obviously the cowboy builders left so a couple of the frames were not straight, so it was a little bit disappointing. However, we had to adjust for that, and I found that worked quite nicely. Remember, this is hard wood, this is an oak door, so it will be troublesome. As long as you've got a sharp knife and a chisel and you sharpen it in between, you should be okay. And you can see here the you know, he did a good job. I used a chisel, a hammer, and just cut out those little specific pieces to allow me to fit the hinge in. I'm going to move the door over just to the frame. As a quick little trick here, you can stick a little pipe or a screwdriver on the bottom of the door, and you can hang a door yourself, so it's a single person job. Put one screw in the top hinge and then one at the bottom, which allows you to test the door and see if there's any spots which are causing the door any issues. So overall, this wasn't a bad process. You're looking at about what, an hour and a half worth of work here just to hang the door, and maybe 2 hours if you're going to hang the locks as well and cut out for the locks. And you can see I'm slotting out the hinges on the frame itself just to create the relevant space, and the door hangs nicely. It swings, opens easily with a 3mm gap all the way around the outside, and that's going to allow for contraction and over time as the door expands. Obviously it is wood. I have got a run seal varnish, so I'm going to be clear coating it in varnish as well, just to give it a weatherproof protection, because rain obviously and things will get in the way of this. You'll see I've only put a screw in there just to hold it in position and to get it ready, and it works nicely. We'll need to get some trim for around the outside of the door and a brush for the bottom as well to stop any drafts coming through on the door. So you will also see further down the line, I'm doing a kitchen out, and I'm also partitioning a house and making a bathroom, like a single toilet. So keep an eye out for that video coming up in the next few weeks or so. So this project, you'll remember I hired some builders and did the entire work. In the pinned comment you can see the article that supports this post, this video, which basically gives you descriptions and information about if you're deciding to make an extension or a small house in the back of your own house, all the planning permission, the consent, all the questions you would need to ask, setting up builders, etc., finding builders, all that kind of thing is helpful to you in that pinned comment and in the description. So keep an eye on that. You can see now what I'm doing here is actually going through and just setting up the lock. So I drilled out for the lock and the frame itself. So that was all like within like 2 hours I had all of that set up basically. And there's a couple of screws that I need to put into here which need the big heads, and the lock works nicely, the door latch works correctly. So all of that's been set up and ready to use, and I like the door. It is a nice solid oak door. A lot of people get the PVC double glazed doors, but I'm not too keen on those. The quality on those is just shoddy. You can kick out the plastic bits out of that very easily. So you can see here now the skirting is coming along. So skirting board is a 4-inch skirting board, all cut to 45 degrees on the corners and all varnished up, ready to be installed around the edge of the room. So this was another maybe a day's worth of work, half a day depending on how smoothly things go. And the skirting board's been set up, the door's been done, and we double coat the door with the internal grade varnish, and the external door was done in the external varnish. And if you have the correct tools, it can be nice and easy, especially with the miter saw, to cut out these 45 degrees, especially using the electronic one. You could use a hand one if you wanted to. You had a small job, for example, this is a small room, so you could technically use a hand saw. And the joints butt up nicely, and these are 3-meter lengths inside, but we had to put a joint because obviously our room is like 5 meters long. So always mix your paint when you get it with a mixer, and you can use a number of ways to apply this to the wall. So what I did do, I didn't trust it, so I put a piece of wood down just to see would it work, and you'll notice here it didn't really work. So that line on the wood would have been what would have been on the far wall. So on the line, the straight line wasn't really straight either. So I thought, okay, let's be careful. This maybe might be better just to use a masking tape. So looking at this, trying to do it sideways, you have to have a very steady hand. I did it in the middle of the wall first just to see if it would actually work, and it got little bits of paint on the side. So see, it's not really doing what it's supposed to do. I got a bigger piece of wood and just followed it down to see if that would help, and I had to pull away. So I'm not sure. I should have just used a brush and done it by hand. That's how I've always done it in the past. So well, I thought I'll give it a shot, but you'll see the line when I move the board away. It's not like a nice clean line. It's just disappointing. So yeah, the remaining wall here is going to be painted with a roller just to get it all the right color, and that's the accent wall. I have also got the flooring, an oak effect 8mm laminate flooring. So I cleared the room out, left the paint to dry for that accent wall, and the room looks a little bit more square now as opposed to a long rectangle. You'll notice here I've got like a foam. It's about 1 or 2 mil, and it's got a silver foil layer underneath it for like a vapor barrier. You can get bigger ones if you want to. Cut down the foam, put the pieces down the floor, and started doing the laminate flooring. So you'll see a time lapse of that. I'll let you watch this next piece. The main time taken is just the edges, the spaces, and fitting around any doors or any issues like that. So you'll notice we used one of these cutters, oscillating cutters, to cut under the frame of the doors, just so the expansion gap is remaining on this.